The fluorescent light above room 7 flickered twice, then gave a long, wheezing sigh before dimming to a dull, uneven glow. Ajay stepped inside, dragging his suitcase over the threadbare carpet that smelled faintly of mildew and old smoke. The air was thick, almost sticky, as if the room itself had exhaled a warning he couldn't yet understand. He set his bag down and glanced around. The calendar on the wall was stuck on July 12, 1987. Its yellowed pages curled at the edges as if recoiling from the present. A faint scuffing sound came from the corner near the window, but when he turned, nothing moved. Just a shadow stretched across the cracked wallpaper, shifting with a life of its own. Ajay swallowed, trying to convince himself it was the wind. Then he heard it, a whisper, soft and brittle, curling through the room like smoke. "Don't sleep." His pulse quickened. He bent to check under the bed and froze. A small scrap of paper was taped there, its edges yellowed and brittle. The ink had faded to brown, but the message was clear. "It sees you." The whisper returned, closer now, brushing against his ear, though no one was there. Ajay's stomach churned. He wanted to laugh, to shake off the unease, but the laughter stuck in his throat. The air felt heavier, oppressive. Something in the room was watching, patient, waiting. And then the door clicked shut behind him, though he was sure he had locked it. Ajay pressed his palm against the chipped wooden door of room 7 and felt it shiver under his fingers. The motel corridor was silent except for the hum of the flickering fluorescent lights overhead, a sound that made his ears ring in the emptiness. The walls were painted a dull beige, but age and neglect had turned them into mottled shades of brown and gray. He shivered, though it wasn't the chill. The air itself seemed off, stagnant, like it had been trapped for decades. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The carpet squished faintly under his shoes, damp in some places, leaving a faint odor of mold and something else he couldn't name. The furniture was basic, a creaking bed with a sagging mattress, a faded armchair in the corner, a small table cluttered with dust, and a cracked lamp that refused to light. The calendar on the wall, July 12, 1987, stared back at him like an accusation. AJ set his bag down and ran a hand through his hair. "It's just an old motel," he muttered to himself, though the words sounded hollow. He flicked the lamp on, but the bulb sputtered, threatening to give way entirely. He cursed under his breath. Something about this place didn't feel right. It wasn't just the decay. It was the weight in the air, a silence so complete it pressed against his eardrums. He moved toward the bed, checking under it again, half expecting to see the note he had found earlier still there. But it was gone as if it had never existed. The whisper from before tickled the edge of his memory. "Don't sleep. It sees you." He shook his head. "Get a grip," he whispered. "It's probably some dumb prank." But the room didn't feel like a place where pranks happened. The mirror above the dresser reflected him, but there was something wrong. His reflection seemed delayed. When he lifted a hand, his mirrored hand hesitated for the fraction of a second, a twitch that made his skin crawl. The phone on the table rang suddenly. The shrill sound cut through the silence and made him jump. He picked it up, heart hammering. "Room 7, a voice said. It was distant, muffled, almost underwater. Then it stopped, replaced by static, then a whisper. "You shouldn't be here." AJ's fingers tightened around the receiver. "Who is this? Hello?" But the line was dead. He set the phone down and moved toward the window, hoping for some reassurance from the world outside. The night was pitch black, and the motel's neon sign flickered weakly, casting long, distorted shadows that crept along the walls of the parking lot. Nothing moved. No cars, no people. Just a stillness that felt alive, watching. He returned to the bed and sat down, trying to steady his racing heart. A draft brushed against his neck. He turned sharply. The window was closed. Then he noticed it. The armchair in the corner was no longer in the corner. It had shifted, a few inches toward the center of the room, as if it had been nudged by invisible hands. AJ swallowed hard. "Okay, stop it," he muttered, pacing. "Just imagination." Just a sudden tap echoed from the ceiling. Tap, tap, tap. Each one precise, deliberate, like footsteps overhead. He froze. The motel had only one floor. There was no one above him. The whispers returned, soft, curling around the room like smoke. "You can't leave." Ajay grabbed his bag and yanked the door handle. Locked. It wasn't supposed to be locked. He twisted it again, harder, but it didn't budge. His breaths came shallow and fast. He backed away, glancing at the dresser. The mirror fogged suddenly, though he hadn't touched it. Words appeared, scrawled in condensation. "Stay." He stumbled backward, bumping into the bed. His hands shook as he reached for the phone again, only to find the cord had been cut cleanly. No dial tone, no line, just emptiness. A memory flickered in his mind. The receptionist had smiled at him that afternoon, a smile too wide, eyes too dark. "People don't stay in 7, she had said. He had laughed it off. Now he wished he hadn't. The whispering grew louder, forming patterns he couldn't comprehend. Voices overlapping, pleading, threatening, mocking. His reflection in the mirror warped and shifted, showing glimpses of faces he didn't recognize, mouths moving, eyes screaming silently. AJ sank to the floor, pressing his palms over his ears, but the sound didn't stop. It had become part of him, inside his skull, burrowing into his thoughts. Shadows along the wall seemed to stretch toward him, moving when he wasn't looking directly at them. He thought of leaving, breaking the door down, running into the neon-lit parking lot, calling someone, anyone. But the thought of moving filled him with dread, as if the motel itself would punish him for trying. He realized with a sinking heart that he was trapped, and that room 7 was alive in a way he could not yet understand. He curled into the corner, trying to tell himself it was temporary, a bad night in a bad room. The whispers softened but never stopped entirely. Just as sleep threatened to take him, a hand seemed to brush against his shoulder. He jerked upright. No one was there, and yet he felt it, watching, patient, waiting. Ajay woke with a start, the memory of the hand brushing his shoulder still etched in his mind. The room was silent now, but silence had a weight, a presence that pressed against him. He rubbed his eyes and looked around. Everything appeared unchanged. The armchair remained slightly closer to the center of the room. The bed sagged in the same way, but he could feel it, the room watching, breathing along with him. He tried to shake off the unease and convince himself that he had been tired, stressed, a victim of his imagination. The flickering fluorescent light overhead hummed in agreement, its uneven glow creating long, crawling shadows across the walls. He walked over to the dresser, to the cracked mirror, hoping to find some anchor to reality. But when he looked, his reflection wasn't quite his own. There was a shadow behind him, tall, shifting, just beyond recognition. He spun around, heart racing, nothing, just the room. But when he looked back at the mirror, the shadow remained. It wasn't following him. It was inside the glass, frozen, waiting. A noise made him jump, a soft whisper, distant but unmistakable. "Ajay." He froze, no one was there. The whisper came again, closer this time, curling around his ears like smoke. "You shouldn't be here." His pulse hammered. He moved toward the door and tugged at the handle again. Locked. He hadn't locked it, he was sure. Panic rose like bile. He banged on the door. Nothing. The corridor remained empty and silent. Desperate, he returned to the bed and grabbed his bag, searching for his phone. Dead. No signal, no connection, no hope. A shiver ran down his spine as he realized he was completely alone. Or at least that's what he was being allowed to think. He sank onto the bed and tried to calm his racing mind. Room 7 was alive. He didn't know how or why, only that it had noticed him, and it wanted something. But what? The first flashback. He remembered driving past the town on a rain-drenched highway earlier that day. The motel had looked unremarkable then. A tired neon sign flickering vacancy. A gravel parking lot empty except for one rusted pickup truck. The receptionist's smile had seemed normal. Too wide, her eyes too dark. She had said almost casually, "People don't stay in 7. He laughed it off at the time. "Room 7? You're joking, right?" Her smile didn't waver. "You'll see," she had whispered, almost under her breath. Ajay had shaken it off. He had told himself he was overthinking things, that he was tired from the drive. But now, the words echoed in his mind, and the cold dread at the back of his skull made more sense. Room 7 didn't want him to leave. Escalation of micro-events, the day, or what felt like day, passed in a haze. Time seemed distorted. He looked at the wall clock. The hands hadn't moved in hours. He glanced at his phone. Dead. The motel was an island, cut off from the world. Small, subtle things began to happen. The bed sagged slightly, as if someone invisible had sat on it. The armchair crept another few inches toward the center of the room. The calendar on the wall seemed to twitch, a page fluttering briefly, though there was no breeze. He heard faint scratching along the walls. Like fingernails searching for an exit, AJ began keeping a journal, scrawling down everything he saw. He wrote of whispers, movements, shadows, and reflections that weren't his own. But the act of writing only seemed to make the room more alive. Each word he scribbled felt like a heartbeat in the motel's chest. And with each heartbeat, the room pressed closer. He heard whispers outside the walls, like neighbors or something pretending to be neighbors, warning him, "Leave, before it's too late. You can't leave." He pressed his ear to the door. Silence. The hallway outside was still, empty, waiting. Paranoia. Sets in by the third day, AJ's mind was unraveling. He could no longer tell what was real and what was illusion. The shadows that moved in the corner of his eyes seemed to take on shapes. Sometimes they resembled people, sometimes him. Sometimes they didn't resemble anything at all. He started hearing more than whispers. Soft thuds, creaks, and taps echoed through the walls. One night, a metallic clatter made him jump. A fork slid across the table by itself. He wanted to scream, but found no sound left his throat. He tried to reason with himself. It's the wind, the building settling. Just stay calm. But calmness was impossible. The room had rules he couldn't understand, forces he couldn't see. Mirrors reflected impossible things, cracks in the wall that didn't exist. Glimpses of doors that led nowhere, faces that weren't his own. He tried sleep once, exhausted, curling into the bed like a child. But the whispers came again, insistent, curling around his skull. Don't sleep. It sees you. He bolted upright. The bed was undisturbed, yet the sheets were wet. Cold sweat or something else. He didn't want to find out. Encounter. With a witness in the late hours, AJ saw someone. He thought it was another guest, or maybe a hallucination. A woman, pale and disheveled, appeared at the doorway. She didn't knock. She didn't speak at first. Finally, she whispered, trembling, I stayed in 7 once. You shouldn't be here. Her eyes darted toward the bed. It watches. Everything. You'll disappear. Before he could respond, she was gone. No footsteps, no creaking door. Just vanished. He rushed to the hallway, empty. He screamed, but no sound emerged. The motel's dark history, Ajay found himself drawn to the small office at the end of the hall. The receptionist was gone, the room empty except for dusty ledgers and faded photographs. Flipping through the journal, he uncovered the motel's secret, 1980s. Guests disappeared in room 7. Names scratched into walls. Blood never found. Teen 90s. Reports of sleepwalking guests who vanished entirely. Thousands. Staff quit abruptly, citing voices, shadows, and something in the walls. One page stood out, a folded scrap of paper with a scrawled message. Once you enter room 7, it owns you. There is no leaving. He felt his stomach drop. That day, that moment, the truth clicked into place. This was no ordinary room. It was a trap, a sentient entity that fed on the fear and life of anyone who stayed. Time distortion and increasing isolation. By now, AJ could no longer measure time. Day and night merged. The room's lights flickered endlessly, the shadows stretching and curling with life of their own. He tried every exit, every window. Locked, blocked, sealed by something beyond his comprehension. Even the air seemed to change, thickening, carrying whispers in languages he couldn't understand. He was alone, but never alone. The room followed him, breathing, moving, watching, creeping physical manifestations. The physical environment began to betray him. The walls seemed to shift subtly, narrowing corners, stretching hallways when he looked away. The mirror reflected impossible scenes, long-forgotten guests staring back, screaming silently. Objects moved, rearranging themselves. A chair he placed by the window ended up in the doorway by morning. The calendar twisted, pages flipping to the same date over and over, July 12, 1987. Each shift reinforced a single truth. The motel was alive, and it was aware of him. Dialogue-driven horror moments sparse. Terrifying interactions punctuated the dread. A voice from the corner. You can't leave. Not now. The vanished woman's whisper. I tried. You'll fail, AJ muttering, desperate. Why? Why me? Each exchange was brief, sharp, and deeply unsettling. Nothing resolved. Everything hinted at a growing, inescapable terror. Climactic micro-event. Leading to climax on the fourth day, AJ discovered the journal detailing the rituals that cursed Room 7. An unknown guest had died violently decades ago, and their spirit, angry, patient, had claimed the room as a feeding ground. As he read, the air thickened. The shadows solidified. The whispers became voices all at once, overlapping. You belong. You belong. You belong. The bed groaned as if someone heavy had sat upon it. The door rattled violently. Ajay realized with icy certainty that the room had no intention of letting him leave. He could run, hide, scream, but nothing would matter. Room 7 would consume him. Ajay sat cross-legged on the bed, the journal open on his lap, pages filled with scrawled names, dates, and symbols that seemed to crawl under his eyes. The whispers had grown louder, no longer soft threads curling through the room, but full voices, overlapping, insistent, almost angry. You can't leave. You belong. We've been waiting. It's your turn. The air pressed down on him, thick and cold, as though invisible hands were clutching at his shoulders. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, but the room had already claimed him. He tried the door, locked, every window sealed. Even the faint elevator down the hall refused to open. He gripped the journal, knuckles white. A sudden movement caught his eye. The mirror reflected him, or what he thought was him, but the reflection lagged, then split. Two AJs stared back at him. One calm, one twisted in silent scream. It's time, the calm reflection whispered. Its voice was his own, yet not. AJ staggered back, tripping over the sagging carpet. The bed creaked as if a weight had landed upon it, pressing him toward the floor. Shadows stretched along the walls, black and thick, writhing, forming shapes he couldn't name. A voice, sharp and sudden, cut through the chaos. Leave? There is no leaving. He bolted to the dresser, slamming his hands against the mirror. It didn't shatter. Instead, it rippled like water, distorting the room behind him. The ceiling stretched and bent. The walls grew taller, curling inward. The floorboard beneath his feet groaned, warped, twisting like it had its own pulse. AJ's heart hammered, fear gnawing at him like a living thing. This is real. This is real. This is happening. The journal slipped from his fingers. It landed open on a page depicting the ritual. A guest lured into room 7, trapped, devoured, not physically, but in memory, in time, in essence. The previous occupant's name stared at him, etched in ink that seemed to shimmer and bleed into the paper. And at the bottom, written in jagged letters, the room claims all who enter. Resistance is futile. The air shifted. A shadow detached itself from the corner of the room, rising like smoke, tall, humanoid, faceless. It moved toward him with purpose. The whispers merged into one voice, deep and guttural. Your fear feeds me. AJ stumbled backward, tripping over the armchair that had somehow moved to block the door. He scrambled to his feet, panting. Think. There has to be a way out. He ran to the bed, yanking the sheets and tossing the armchair aside. His reflection in the mirror moved independently now, gesturing at him. The twisted double-mouthed words he couldn't hear but understood. Fight. Or join! A sharp screech erupted from the walls, a sound that made his teeth ache. The shadows swelled, crowding him, pressing against every inch of his body. He could feel the pressure in his skull, the whispers vibrating his very bones. Why are you doing this? He screamed, voice raw. A slow, deliberate laugh answered him. It was everywhere at once, echoing through the walls, the floor, the ceiling. You entered willingly. Curiosity is yours. Despair is ours. Ajay backed toward the dresser, noticing for the first time that the mirror was no longer reflecting him at all. Instead, he saw past guests, frozen mid-scream, staring at him with hollow eyes. One by one, they raised their hands, pointing at him. You belong here. The journal on the floor flipped open on its own, pages rustling like wings. He tried to snatch it, but invisible force flung it across the room. It landed open on a blank page, except words scrawled themselves across it, dripping black ink. Submit or perish. AJ screamed, collapsing to the floor, trying to cover his ears. The walls began to pulse, breathing, alive. The bed frame twisted, groaning. The fluorescent light flickered violently, throwing the room into strobe-like bursts of darkness and pale green glow. In each flash, the shadows seemed to take a step closer. He remembered the first warning, the receptionist's smile. People, Don't stay in 7. And now he understood. It wasn't just a warning. It was a prophecy. He had walked into a predator that consumed not flesh, but time, life, memory. The shadows reached him, coiling around his arms and legs, tugging, pushing, pressing. He thrashed, but every movement seemed anticipated. Every scream echoed back at him, distorted, multiplied. His reflection in the mirror grew larger, taller, eyes glowing red. It leaned closer, whispering in a voice that was unmistakably his own. "You cannot fight what you already are." AJ's vision blurred. The walls and floor bent into shapes that made no sense. The ceiling dropped close enough to graze his head, then shot upward into impossible heights. Time fractured. Seconds stretched into hours. Minutes collapsed into instantaneous events. He had no sense of sequence, only the continuous presence of the room feeding, pressing, swallowing. He clawed at the walls, leaving scratches that bled shadows. The shadows pulled back only to surge forward again, faster, thicker. Every object moved against him, the armchair spinning, the bed twisting, the dresser groaning under weight that wasn't there. A single whisper cut through the chaos, clear and deliberate. "Scream." "They will hear." He did. He screamed with every ounce of his being, and for a moment the shadows paused, as if amused by his effort. Then they pressed harder, more insistent, whispering names he didn't recognize, telling him stories of torment he didn't want to hear. Ajay stumbled backward, reaching for the door again. His hands passed through the handle. The door wasn't solid. The walls rippled, revealing glimpses of previous guests, trapped, screaming silently in eternal torment. The room itself had become a living trap, a predator, and he was prey. "Join us." A voice breathed in his ear, cold and wet. Desperation gripped him. He grabbed the journal one last time, holding it to his chest like a shield. The words on the pages twisted and writhed, black ink rising as tendrils, trying to wrap around him. He fought, slamming the journal to the floor. The mirror cracked. Not shattering, but spreading cracks like spiderwebs across its surface. Through the web of broken reflections, he saw himself, older, hollow-eyed, twisted, merged with the room, becoming one of its many victims. The sight stole his breath. "It wants you," whispered the reflection, smiling. "It always wants more." AJ's knees buckled. The bed frame lifted slightly, holding him off the floor as if the room itself was toying with him. He screamed, tears streaming, the sound swallowed immediately by the oppressive walls. The shadows began to envelop him, slipping under doors, through the ceiling, through the floor. He could feel his skin prickle, his memory fragment, his will bending. The journal slipped from his hands, landing open at a page that wasn't there before. Written in letters of smoke, "There is no escape, only surrender." And then in the mirror he saw it, a hand, black and faceless, reaching out from the surface. It passed through the glass and touched his shoulder. He felt the cold seep into his bones. He screamed, not just in fear, but in recognition. He belonged here now. Everything went black. The collapse of reality. When AJ regained awareness, if it could even be called awareness, the room had returned to its normal state, or at least, normal for room 7. The flickering fluorescent light hummed gently. The bed sagged. The calendar was fixed on July 12, 1987. The journal lay closed on the floor, but he knew. He knew that nothing would ever be the same. The room had claimed him, integrated him into its endless collection of trapped souls. The whispers were quieter now, patient, waiting for the next visitor. In the mirror, his reflection stared back at him, pale and hollow-eyed. It moved independently now, aware, patient. Another guest will come, it seemed to say. The shadows retreated to the corners, stretching thin but alive, waiting. Time ticked forward again, or did it? Perhaps the motel had its own chronology now, a rhythm that no one could escape. Ajay's screams had merged with the room, another layer in its unending hunger. The air felt lighter, almost normal, but only for a moment. The horror was not gone. It was patient, inevitable, eternal. The final sound was not a scream, not a whisper, not a footstep. It was the soft, deliberate click of the door shutting behind the next guest, sealing their fate. The sun rose, or perhaps it hadn't. Ajay didn't know anymore. Time had become meaningless. The fluorescent hum in room 7 was steady, almost soothing, as if nothing had happened. Yet everything had changed. The motel was quiet, almost normal. The front desk was empty. Dust motes floated in the weak morning light filtering through grimy windows. Outside, a car passed, kicking gravel across the parking lot. Inside, nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Nothing called except Room 7. The door to Room 7 sat closed, unremarkable. Its paint chipped and faded. The handle was cool to the touch. To a passerby, it was just another room. But Ajay, or what had been Ajay, was inside. Not alive, not dead, but something between. A presence folded into the walls, shadows tracing his outline like smoke, memory, and despair. The motel's staff arrived later in the day. One of them, a young woman with pale skin and tired eyes, glanced at Room 7 with a brief shiver. She didn't ask why. She never asked. No one did. They cleaned the hallway, replaced the trash, and prepared the rooms for new guests. Room 7 remained untouched, sacred in its secrecy. A new guest arrived in the late afternoon, a man with a suitcase, weary from the road. He asked for a room and smiled nervously at the receptionist. The woman's lips tightened just slightly. She handed him the key. Room 7, people. Don't stay in 7, she whispered under her breath, barely audible. The man laughed politely, shrugging off the warning. I'm sure it's fine. And that was all it took. The door clicked shut behind him, and inside, the shadows stirred. Inside Room 7, from the inside, time flowed differently. The fluorescent hum resonated through the walls, carrying the echoes of previous guests. Ajay's consciousness drifted in the space between reality and memory. He could see the room as it had been, a traveler's temporary haven, a place of mundane furniture, faded carpets, and cracked mirrors. But he could also see it as it truly was, a predator, alive and patient, feeding on curiosity, fear, and desperation. He wandered the room without moving, an observer and participant at once. The armchair shifted slightly closer to the center. The calendar on the wall fluttered again, pages rustling with secrets no living person could read. The bed groaned subtly, as though settling under the weight of unseen forms. Shadows crept along the walls, lingering, waiting. Ajay tried to speak. His lips moved. His voice emerged as a whisper. I tried to leave, but no one heard him. There was no one, only the room, and the room listened. Lingering reflections through the cracked mirror, he watched the next guest unpack. A towel fell, a key jingled. The man smiled at the air, unaware of the presence behind him, the history of Room 7 layered like sediment in the walls. The shadows twitched, inching closer to the man's belongings. The bed sagged, welcoming him. AJ remembered every detail. The whispering voices, the moving furniture, the metallic taps, the notes under the bed. Each moment was etched into him, and he could see them all simultaneously, the room folding past, present and future into a single suffocating consciousness. The journal lay open on the floor, ink shimmering as if freshly written. Names of past guests glowed faintly, including his own. His hand reached toward it, but nothing could touch it anymore. The room had claimed him entirely. You belong, it whispered, and he did. The motel outside. Downstairs, the parking lot seemed ordinary. Gravel crunched under tires, wind rustled through the sign's neon tubes. To a casual observer, the motel was just a tired building on a back road, nothing remarkable. But the air carried something more, an invisible pulse, a vibration that travelers sometimes sensed in the pit of their stomachs. They couldn't explain it. A fleeting sense of wrongness, unease, an instinct to drive past and never look back. And they didn't. Room 7 waited patiently, always. The receptionist cleaned the lobby, her expression unreadable. A calendar behind her desk was frozen on July 12, 1987. A bell jingled as the next guest arrived. Room 7's door gleamed faintly, indifferent yet expectant. Echoes of the past Ajay's awareness floated in the room, aware of everything, nothing, everyone, no one. He could feel the layers of past guests, each one trapped, each one another thread in the room's web. Their faces flickered in the mirror when the light caught it at certain angles, a silent gallery of despair. A faint whisper slithered through him. Another will come. Another will stay. He tried to scream, tried to warn the new guest, but his voice had no substance. His hands reached for the doorknob, passing through solid wood. The walls pulsed gently, as if amused by his efforts. The room was infinite and inescapable. Time slowed to an unbearable crawl. Seconds stretched into eternity. Each breath, each heartbeat, each flicker of the fluorescent light carried the weight of centuries of terror. And yet to anyone outside it appeared normal, mundane, safe. The final chill night fell. The motel lights flickered on automatically. Room 7 remained closed, unremarkable from the outside. Inside, the shadows leaned into the corners, patient. The air was thick with memory and hunger. Ajay, fully integrated into the room, felt the pulse of Room 7 in his chest. He could see the new guest brushing away cobwebs from the lamp, checking the window locks, sighing with relief at the faint breeze from the air conditioner. "It's fine," the man muttered. "Just an old building." The whispering began again, softer, patient, almost polite. "You will belong." The man yawned and set his suitcase on the bed, unaware. The shadows crept closer. The mirror fogged slightly, words forming in condensation. "I am here. I see you." Outside, the receptionist's eyes flicked toward the room once more, her lips tightening. She whispered again, barely audible. "People." "Don't stay in 7. The door clicked softly. The shadows shifted. Time folded inward. Room 7 waited. And Ajay, another layer in its consciousness, whispered into the walls. "It sees you. It always sees you." The motel resumed its quiet rhythm. Gravel crunched in the parking lot. The sun, or what passed for it, rose and fell. Room 7 remained, patient, inevitable, eternal.